What did your boyfriend girlfriend do that made you think I'm going to marry this person? We were best friends almost from the moment we met. But the specific time that sticks out was a night we spent talking and laughing on her balcony all night until the sun started coming up. Felt like I was reunited with a part of myself that I never knew was missing. That's almost exactly what happened with me. Except we laid in my driveway talking until the sun came up. I remember there was a break in conversation and I realized how much at home I felt. It was crazy. Because we hadn't been friends for too long. But got together soon after that. Now it's 7 years later. And I still feel that feeling. I'm gonna be completely honest. He said mashed potatoes is just Irish guacamole and I knew what I had to do. Considering we're on Reddit. This is the most believable one here. Not one big moment. But several small ones during 3 years of dating. One day having a light supper. I simply asked, "Do you want to get married?" She simply answered, "Sure. I don't see myself living without you." Double quote. I like this. I don't have a big moment either. Just a slow, peaceful realization that our lives were going to happen in parallel. She says bless you when my dogs sneeze. I do this. Of course you bless those little souls. If anyone deserves it, it's dogs. Survived a 3-year long distance relationship. My sister did it for 5 years. They are now together and engaged. We were both working at a restaurant and he was a busboy. My mom was there drinking with her friends and was pretty much white girl wasted. My now husband went up to her and asked to take her plate. She stood up and said, "No motherfucker, but you can get me some Giga. Double quote. He walked to the employee area not far from my drunken mom. I asked him if he was alright and he said, "Yeah. But there's some BTCH over there." And points at my mom. I chuckled and replied, "Yeah. That's my mom." Every inch of his exposed skin flushed and he started stammering. I realized he liked me and offered my number so he wouldn't feel so bad. We've been married 14 years. My wife, then girlfriend, and I went to Chicago for Riot Fest in 2013. I would get strep like twice a year. Finally got tonsils out in 2014, and on the last day of the festival, I caught it. We were supposed to leave on Tuesday morning, and we had Monday to explore Chicago. But I felt like complete tea and had a high fever. She took care of everything. She went to Target and got me some cheap lounge clothes. Got me food. Rescheduled our flight. Extended our stay in our hotel room. She did it all. Man. We flew from Chicago to Seattle. Seattle to Anchorage, so I had a lot of time on the flight to reflect. That kinda solidified it for me. She was so selfless and caring and knew I wanted to be with her forever. We're both military and she was supposed to leave Alaska in like 6 months. And I didn't want to risk long distance or her leaving, so we hurried up and got married like 2 weeks after the Chicago sick trip. Dated for a year and a half and this month will be our 7-year wedding anniversary. I had somebody ask my stepmother whether this nice boy sitting next to me at the dinner table at a wedding was her son-in-law, and I said, quite without thinking about it, "Not yet." And rather than seeming at all alarmed, my then boyfriend made a face rather like that of a newly adopted puppy which has just discovered it is not going back to the pound. And I was like, oh. Well then. Asterisk. My grandmother passed away very early into me and my fiance's relationship. I'm very emotional and he had every right to be scared off. But was nothing but supportive and caring. And when my dad got sick, I absolutely could not have handled it without my fiance's support. Knowing I could cry whenever I wanted and he would be there to be my shoulder is the truest love I've ever felt. My now wife is the first person I ever opened up to about one of my childhood best friends dying when we were in middle school. I don't know what prompted it, but I felt comfortable enough to share with her only a few months into our relationship. And when I broke down crying, she held me and comforted me and was just an absolute angel. We were only 19. But I think I knew then. Me. Turns off the PS3 as she sits down on the couch next to me. Huh? Why'd you stop playing? Double quote. Me. I figured you'd wanna watch TV or something. Double quote. Huh? But I love watching you play. Also, could you show me how to play this one? It looks like a lot of fun. Double quote. She wasn't a gamer before we started living together. I miss her. I was already in love with him and figured I'd spend my life with him. Then my sister had an aneurysm and died some weeks later. His care and compassion during that period really sealed the deal. I was sitting at her funeral with him and realized that one day one of us would have to bury the other. That was sad. But okay. It's been 14 years since then. We've been happily married for 12 and together 18 all up. Not a big moment, but I met my wife when I finished uni and was looking for jobs. I was completely broke. One day we planned to go out for dinner and I had a cute 30 to my name. My petrol was on the low and stupid me thought I could pick her up, make it to the restaurant, drop her back and make it home. Our meal came to around a cute 46 and my petrol was on empty when we arrived at the restaurant. I remember that day I pretended I just ate and got a dessert while she had her meal. At the end of our date, I asked the waiter for the bill and he smiled back saying she's already taken care of that, she must have paid when she took a trip to the restroom. I asked her 3 years later why she paid and she replied, I wanted to see you again. We've been together for 8 years and married for 3. It's what he didn't and did do. He wasn't intimidated or put off by being around my special needs sibling. And after I briefly mentioned a particular food my sibling liked, he brought her some and gave it to her himself, even helping her open the package. Guys I had dated before just stared uncomfortably at her from a distance. As someone with a handicapped mom I feel you. She is all there mentally but missing a leg. And sometimes people, especially my previous boyfriends, just stare at the residual limb from a distance or try to avoid her altogether. This is so real. When I explained my view of marriage and how I expected to be loved and respected, and he agreed 100%, explaining it back to me in such a way that convinced me he believed the same, and that he truly listened to me and respected my mind and values, I started crying and was sure from that moment on. 3 years later we got married. 5 years after that and he's exceeded every expectation. I had a dream of what marriage could be. But what it really is for me far exceeds what I had hoped. I had issues with a kidney stone and needed to go to the hospital. My ex-GF and I had a long distance relationship at the time. I had called her and told her I was on the way to the hospital. She knew I was walking there and told me to call her when I got there. I did. They put me on the morphine and I hadn't slept in almost 2 days. So it knocked me out for a few hours. She had panicked and called my house, the police, to get the hosp number, and the hosp like 6 times. The nurse finally told me when I woke up. I felt so bad, but at the same time, I had never felt so loved or cared for in my life. I knew, for sure, no doubts, that I wanted to marry her. It didn't work out, but that's when I was absolutely sure I wanted to. This isn't the thing. My partner and I have a long story between us. Not married, but we're weathering the COVID storm together in a 1-bedroom apartment and will probably tie the knot once the pandemic is a year or 2 behind us. Anyways, we got a walk after wanting one for the longest time. My better half made fried rice yesterday. I got Facebook ads for engagement rings later in the evening. How the FCK did they know? My dog instantly liked him. He is bald and has a beard. My dog historically didn't like men in general, but especially bald men with beards. My dog liked him the first time she met him. On our second date, it made me decide that he was someone I would want to be serious with. We've been married for 7 years and have a 3-year-old daughter. My dog made the right choice. There was no particular moment. She's just the kindest, sweetest, deepest, smartest, most beautiful woman that I've ever known. The fact that she loves me confuses me because she's so out of my league that my inner idiot has a stroke every time I look at her. She's stuck with me through some of the hardest years of my life without a complaint or a thought of leaving, except when she thought I would be better off. I love her with my whole soul and have for 7 years. I've been quite fond of her for 8. He was humming as we were taking a walk together. Then he said, "If I'm ever so lucky as to get to live with you, you'll find that I sing in the shower." The presumptuousness of the comment made me laugh and fall in love. I told him that part of my life plan was to begin trying for a baby in 1-2 years. His response was, "Honestly, I'd be happy about it if we were pregnant now." I was like, "No. Not now. I've got stuff to take care of first." But my god, that was the best answer. I wanted to be upfront about my expectations early on in our relationship, because I knew what I was looking for in a life partner, and I was already 31 when I met him. He's lived up to my expectations and some. Close bracket. While we were dating, I got really sick. My body looked, felt, and smelled horrible. Sickly sweet smell. I was in and out of hospitals trying to figure out what it was, and that whole time he never left. I told him during that I wouldn't blame him for leaving since I looked horrible, and instead of doing fun stuff, all I did was go back and forth between my bed and the hospital. It was definitely not what he signed up for, but he took my face in his hands and said, "You're beautiful." He looked me in the eyes, then kissed my forehead. He's done many more things, but that one was the first real time I was like, I need him to be my rock. I love this man. That whole ordeal lasted 3 long years. We've been married 4 years now. He's definitely been my rock through some really hard times since then, and I'm grateful for him. I'm profound deaf, and after series of hanging out with guys who claimed they wanted to learn ASL and dump me like hot potato after the novelty wears off, usually in a couple of weeks. My then chemistry lab partner took ASL course without me knowing it. One night we got really drunk together. He really signed without any inhibition. We are now married for 14 years and counting, with an adorable toddler. Nothing he does intentionally, but he often has nightmares. He had a tough childhood and suffers from mental health problems. Whenever he has those nightmares, he's freaking out while being asleep. He screams. He kicks. He's out of control. Then I gently put my hand on his head, his hand or his back, and he immediately calms down. His breath slows down and he stops screaming, etc. I know this is not about me, and I know he's not doing it intentionally, but this is a very special feeling. And he manages to make me feel like this every day. I'm very complicated. I also have some psychological issues and a very fked up relationship with my mum. He's there. He talks to me, listens, and whenever I need it, he gently puts his hand on my head, my hand or my back. I can't describe how he does it, but he's home for me. My girlfriend at the time had a very sudden, very severe bout of early onset arthritis. It was bad. Her knee swelled up to 3 times its normal size and her hands were permanently curled into claws. And she was in pain. Bad pain constantly. She was bedbound, and I took all of my vacation and sick days that I could to take care of her. But eventually I had to go back to work. I remember so vividly coming home and seeing that despite her condition she was up and coming to greet me. Limping. Hands curled like raptor claws and this giant beautiful smile on her face. She was just so happy to see me. Nothing else. Not even the massive pain she was in. Matted. I swore I would marry her then and there. We had just gotten home from Christmas at his grandma's and were still sitting in the car. We had talked about marriage before, but were kind of unsure about it. Not because we didn't love each other and want to be together. It's a big commitment. He turned to me in the car and said, I just need you. And honestly, at that moment, I didn't care if he never asked me to marry him. I knew exactly how he felt. And I felt the same way. It was perfect. He proposed later that evening. My granddad died when we hadn't been together for very long. My husband stayed up with me the whole night that I found out he had died and supported me and made sure I kept eating and drinking. When we were in college, she pulled some nunchucks from her closet and proceeded to play with them, Brad Pitt in Fight Club style, for about 20 minutes while I sat on her bed. We hadn't hooked up yet at that point, but I knew it was meant to be. That was in 2003. We've been together since shortly after that. We caught a glance from across the room and my heart did backflips. We've been together almost 6 years now. It's the little things he does that makes me want to marry him. I love that he's the type to laugh at his own jokes until he has to gasp for air. 3. There was a guy hitting on her. I talked to her about it and asked whether she wanted me to intervene or not. She said no. So I'll let it go. The next day at lunch he tried playing footsie with her. She smiled at him. And when he smiled back she immediately yanked his head into the table. I have never seen her move that fast again. It's been 20 years. The morning after our first hookup we went out for breakfast. Halfway through, she asked what I thought we should have for lunch. And when we figured that out, we planned dinner. Been married for 18 years. I'm fat as FCK and happy as hell. It was the dead of winter. We had a vicious blizzard. And my apartment building was blacked out. So no heat. My boyfriend hauled number 150 of firewood on a city bus for an hour to make sure I was warm. I had a fireplace so we snuggled together in front of the fire and I knew at that moment. The 15th of August we celebrated our 28th wedding anniversary. I had a spinal injury and lost the ability to walk temporarily. I was in agonizing pain. And he took me to the emergency room. When the doctor wheeled me out of the hospital, they covered me with a hospital sheet because it was chilly out. My boyfriend was taking care of me hand and foot for the next week, helping me onto the toilet and making sure I was okay getting out of the bathtub. And he took that hospital sheet, pinned it to my bedroom wall, and brought over a projector to make it into a movie screen. I have never felt more loved. We had only been dating a couple months but it was going well. I had to travel for work. And he offered to stay at my apartment and take care of my pets as well as drop me off and pick me up from the airport in return for being allowed to use my car. I was nervous because my little green cheek conure was an absolute terror. She would fly up to and attack people randomly. He was well aware of how nasty she was but wasn't worried. Halfway through the work trip he sends me a photo of the bird happily sitting on his shoulder and said your bird likes Wu-Tang Clan. Double quote. I realized I had to marry him. 5 years in August. Peas. Once he moved in the bird calmed down. My partner really stepped up for me when my dad died. My partner had never met my dad, only knew of the effect my dad had on me. My dad was an addict and was never able to stay clean for more than 6 months at a time. My dad always made me so stressed and scared due to his choices and his lifestyle. But I was dedicated to maintaining a relationship with him despite the way he affected me. My stress around my dad caused hardships in my relationship, which caused my partner to resent my dad. I don't blame them for that. Despite all of this, my partner was there for me beyond anything I could have ever hoped for. Picked me up off the floor, made sure I was fed, stayed with me while I cried my heart out for weeks. Never said one single negative thing, even though there were so many things that could have been said. My partner had never understood why I wanted a relationship with my dad. But they were so respectful and caring and empathetic when I needed it the most. Even when I directed my anger at them. My partner was able to see it for what it was, misdirected grief. This proved to me that this is my person.